Good morning, YouTube. It is July 6th, Saturday. Hope everybody had a happy 4th of July. Just out here early this morning, getting a ride in. I figured I'd do a quick owner review of my Honda CB500F. This is a 2015 model. I've had this bike for 3 years. My first motorcycle. And I don't have a lot of negative things to say about it, guys. I've been pretty pleased with it. I think it fits the bill for what it's trying to be. It's not anything more than that, which is just a naked standard to ride around and have fun on, and possibly make your everyday commuter. I wouldn't categorize this as any type of touring setup, touring bike. I mean, you could set it up maybe for some extra light touring, but mainly it's just kind of your modern day little UJM, just universal Japanese motorcycle. And I would say this fits that bill pretty well. It is very easy to ride, very comfortable, very forgiving for anybody who's new. Plenty of power. You're not going to get tired of it too soon. It's not like I think you can accomplish pretty much everything you need to on this motorcycle, except for, like I said, heavy duty touring. Gets highway speed just fine. I mean, it can be a little bit of a beating without the fairing, since it has no wind protection at all. I believe that can be solved with some aftermarket windshields, but I don't have one, so I don't know how well they work. And from when I see the windshields, they don't look like they do much, to be fair. But I see people have them on there, and they claim to do better than nothing. So that'd be forever. Whoever gets a bike to decide, if that's something they want to deal with. For this around town stuff right now, like I'm doing, just cruising the suburbs, I don't really need any wind protection. 471 parallel twin. Honda has this motor, I believe, in about 4 different models. This one is, like I said, the 500F. There is a 500X, the 500R, and I believe the other one is, don't quote me on this exactly, I believe it is a CMX 500, which is the Honda Rebel 500. I believe they're using the exact same motor. Now they may be all tuned a little bit differently, but I think for the most part it's the same power plant. I guess somewhere in the upper 40, I'd say like 47 to 49 horsepower. Sorry guys, I don't have the exact specifications. There's a lot of information on this motorcycle online. I didn't want to make this like a spec review. I just kind of wanted to give it a real world application and experience type of review. So pardon me if I'm a little off on some of these numbers. But yeah, it's a nice little parallel twin. I think it's a good motor. It's got plenty of power. You can see right now I'm going like almost 60. Speed limit here is 45. Just cruising. She sounds like she's working, but she's actually doing alright. She's purring along. My bike sounds probably a little bit different than a stock one would sound. I did replace the muffler, the exhaust. I just put a shorty pipe on there. It's probably a little bit louder than it needs to be, a little bit louder than I anticipated it would be. But I'm willing to deal with it, because before it sounded almost like a scooter, kind of like a sewing machine, I've heard it referred to. So Let's see, gadgets, pretty basic stuff, you know, to keep the price point low on this. Honda didn't put a lot of extras on it. And that's okay, because, I mean, when you're riding, you don't want to think about a lot of extra things. You just want to focus on the ride, focus on getting better. And this motorcycle definitely allows you to do that, especially if you're a beginner. If you're more experienced, I still think you can have a lot of fun on this motorcycle. It's fun to ride. I'll go over some of the things I really like about it and some of the things that I think are the selling points. And then I'll try to cover some things that maybe you just might need to consider, you know. But yeah, it has a speedometer, it's got the clock there, you got your total mileage, you can see how much, if you want to switch it up, you can see how much miles per gallon you're getting. Probably switch it to kilometers if you need to as well. Got my fuel gauge and my tach. There's no gear shift indicator. Seeing as this is, you know, here in America is geared towards a beginner bike. In Europe, I don't think as much as a beginner bike. It's actually, I think, was created specifically for, again, don't quote me on this, guys. I believe it's called the A2 license for European countries that follow that model. So I don't think you can just go buy this motorcycle in Europe. If you're a certain age or whatever, you have to go through, you know, certain types of CCs like 125s, 250s, etc. before you can even get to this motorcycle. But here in America, this is considered like a beginner bike, and you know, I would agree with that. The power is not crazy. It is there, but it's not so much that you're ever gonna lose control. I don't feel. You know, as I was just getting into riding, you know, I made some errors, and this bike was very forgiving, and you know, I've never gotten myself in a weird situation or a bad situation because I couldn't control the power on the bike, right? You know, it's not going to bring my front up on me on accident. I'm not going to pop a wheelie or anything. I'm not, you know, granted, there's always stuff that can happen if you're not paying attention, but you know, if you're taking some of those things out of the equation, you know, I think you'll be able to kind of focus more on just the riding aspect. But yeah, like I said, I think in the upper 40s of horsepower for 500, I think that's decent. I mean, the bike is a little heavy, I think, for what it is. Close to 500 pounds wet. I'll say like 430 something. But it feels light. It feels very flickable. You know, I can flick it if I need to. I feel very in control. The sitting position is very comfortable. I'm pretty upright. You know, there's a light, very slight forward lean angle, but you can probably adjust that if you needed to with some risers. I actually have some I need to install. I just wanted to try it, see if I maybe preferred a little bit higher bar position. But the riding position on this, I think, is a great selling point, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to go after this model versus maybe the R model. They didn't have the X model, and at the time I hadn't really looked into the X model. You know, looking back, that might be the model I would have chosen, actually, because it's even more upright, I believe, and it's got a little bit more travel suspension-wise. And I know the new 2019 500X actually had I don't want to say a lot of upgrades, but it did have some decent upgrades. And I believe these models, also the new 500s, have 6 speeds, while this one has a 5 speed. So, but it is what it is. I got this one, and you know, I've enjoyed it. You know, it fits the bill, like I said before. It's good to kind of cruise around town. Right now, I'm in my city. I'm kind of in the outskirts of town. I'm going about 60 right now. I'm speeding. Speed limit is like 45. But you know, you can see I'm cruising. I'm not. You know, you can maybe hear the motorcycle. She's working, but she's not straining. She's a little, you know, she's a little buzzy. I think a lot of it has to do with the pipe I have on it. You know, before it was a little bit smoother sounding, but you know, 60, 5 more miles per hour, 65, and I'm, you know, highway speed. So that is not a concern on this motorcycle. You can ride on the highway. It's just not as comfortable as some other motorcycles on the highway because it is naked and you're getting the full brunt of the wind on your chest. So that's just something to consider. It's not a deal breaker, I don't think. If you're not riding a lot of highway miles, it's not a deal breaker at all. So full disclosure on this, I've tried to do a couple reviews already, and you know, I'm new at this motovlogging thing. I wouldn't consider myself a professional motovlogger, and I'm not sure if this is something I'm going to do very consistently, but I do like motorcycling. I like the motorcycling community. I like, you know, learning about motorcycles, and something I picked up on a little bit later in life as a hobby. And so I wanted to at least kind of give a real world view of what this motorcycle is capable of, and you know, what I use it for, and what I think what it offers to people out there who might be considering this model. I did buy it new. That's maybe one of my bigger regrets as a motorcyclist, is buying a new motorcycle as my first motorcycle. I haven't had any issues with it, and that was kind of the purpose of me getting a new bike. That was just, I didn't want to deal with, you know, the bike not running or having to drop some money into repairing it. And you know, I didn't know a lot about motorcycles at the time. I've learned a little bit more, obviously, as I've gone along. But I just kind of wanted something reliable, something simple, and something I knew I was going to be able to enjoy, and not, you know, buy it and then it become like a headache that I got to maintain or what have you. So that's why I went new. Looking back, you know, I probably should have gone used, but you know, take it with you as you will. This was a really good deal, because I got this motorcycle like at the end of 2016, and it was 2015. So you know, I think it was priced at less than $5,000 after all the dealer fees and all that, probably right around $5,000. And for a new motorcycle that's probably going to last, you know, at the rate that I'm riding, which, you know, given some life events I've had, isn't a lot. I just had a baby, I got married, and I don't do a lot of long trips. Like I said, a lot of it's just kind of around town and riding to work. So I've only put like 2,500 miles on it over 3 years. So I mean, this motorcycle, if I wanted, it could last me 15, 20 years, I think, at this rate, you know, just doing the things I do now. But my goal is to eventually do a little bit longer trips. You know, maybe wishful thinking on my behalf, since I've never done any of that stuff, but I'd like to, you know, do some touring, light touring initially, just to see if it's something I do enjoy. You know, in my mind, I think it'd be awesome, but maybe the reality is once you get out there, you know, it might not be as awesome, because, you know, you never know until you actually do it. But the goal would be to do, you know, get into that kind of adventure style riding eventually, and travel and do things like that. You know, I hope I have a long motorcycling career. But really what I wanted for a first bike was just something that I could learn on, something I wasn't going to get, as I say, tired of, or say, hey, this isn't powerful enough. You know, people in the United States, they drive fast, so you know, it's not to say you can't get by with a 250 or a 300. I mean, you can. I'm a bigger guy though, so you know, you're upwards of 200 pounds on a 250. You know, can you get it up to highway speed? Probably. Is it going to be very fast? I mean, I'm going to guess no. And the way people drive, you know, in America, in a lot of the places, a lot of bigger cities or, you know, suburbs, is they drive fast. You know, I grew up in Texas, and the speed limit there I think is like 70, but on the highway, you know, people are going like 85, 90, and it's really similar out here in Arizona and Phoenix. You know, people are going, they're going way bigger than what the speed limit is, faster than the speed limit is. Sorry, and so I think that warrants consideration when you're buying a motorcycle. You know, not that I do a lot of highway miles, but if I'm ever going to get on the highway and, you know, I need it, you know, I want to have a little bit of passing power, and this one has it. You know, it's not mounds of torque, right, like some Beaten Twin or something like that, but it's there. Like, it's accessible. You have to maybe downshift, yeah, you know, in some instances, but I've never been down this way before. Just kind of cruising around. Like I said, I'm on the outskirts over here. I got up pretty early today. I'm an early bird, not by choice, kind of more by requirement. I get up early for work pretty much every day, so on weekends my brain is just kind of up and at 'em at like 5. So, but that's good, because here in Phoenix, or in the Phoenix area, I'm actually in Chandler. You know, right now in the summer, the highs are like over 100 degrees. So by like 10 o'clock today, it'll be close to 100. And I don't enjoy riding in hot weather personally. It's like, to me, it's comparable to riding through like a blow dryer. There's just no amount of speed that can make 105 degrees feel any cooler. So I got up early. It's only like 6 something here today right now. It's a beautiful morning. But out here you can ride all season long, and you know, some people are more hardcore about it than others, obviously. But back to the motorcycle. Some pros about it, I think. Let's focus on the pros. You know, Honda reliability. I think that's a big one. You know, I think everybody knows in the motorcycle industry, Honda is kind of known maybe for some of its vanilla models. I wouldn't consider this a vanilla engine. It's, for what it is, I think they did a really good job. I think they hit the nail on the head with what they were looking for. You know, this might be faster than some, like, you know, bigger displacement bikes that are maybe single cylinder thumpers or something like that. But you're not going to probably win a lot of races on this thing. It's not a racer. It looks like it's got that look, that street racer look or whatever you call it. The Street Fighter kind of Ducati look. But it's not, you know, it's meant to look fast, but it's not, you know, it's faster than your average, you know, car or whatever. Probably faster than a lot of motorcycles, but it's not. If you're looking to be a speed demon, you're going to be probably disappointed at the end of the day. Now, with that said, I think you could take this motorcycle or the 500R model to the track, and you could probably have a really good time because, you know, this thing revs out pretty high, and, you know, you maybe adjust the suspension on this one specifically, and you might have yourself a nice little track bike. You can definitely do twisties with this thing. It handles pretty well. Again, maybe because I'm a bigger guy, the suspension maybe needs a little bit of tweaking. I do scrape the peg every now and then when I take a corner and really lean into it. But I think that has some application in that regard. You know, you can make it a track bike, but in regards to, like, you're going to be around squidding, you know, trying to do wheelies around town or race your fellow brethren bikers, you know, you're probably going to get spanked by some of those super sports, no doubt. You know, it's not what it is, you know. But what's fun about this motorcycle is, I mean, you're actively engaged with driving it, you know. Now, take my opinion for what it's worth. I don't have a lot of motorcycling experience. You know, from my understanding, on like a 600RR or like a leader bike, you know, you're not getting out of first or second gear in a lot of instances when you're kind of riding around town here. And to me, that's kind of defeats the purpose of motorcycling. You know, on this bike, I'm banging through the gears. You know, I can get the fifth gear between most lights, you know, and that's what makes it fun. That's what makes it engaging, and that's, I think, what really makes it so good is it's kind of that beginner bike, or that just that all-around motorcycle, right? You feel like you're riding, you're shifting, you're in tune with what the motorcycle's doing. You're not just in one gear, you know, and you're not sitting there worried if you accidentally crack the throttle, you're gonna lose it. Power band's really predictable. You know what you're getting. So I think that's a pro. Seating position, I think, is another really good pro on this. For somebody that's new, I feel like you feel like you're in really good control here. You know, I don't know, you can't see probably how I'm sitting, but my feet are kind of right under me. If I need to on this motorcycle, I can actually stand up on the pegs. Really easy, you know. And I'm pretty upright here. You know, I'm not lean. There's a slight lean angle that after a while, just because I have kind of a bad back, will get to me some days. It just depends if I've stretched or whatever, or I don't really stretch that often. It just kind of depends. But, you know, I'm pretty upright. The riding triangle, as they call it, is, I think, very comfortable for anyone, especially somebody that's new. And so like somebody like me who came, you know, my first experience riding a motorcycle was at my MSF course, the basic rider course, and it was on a Honda Nighthawk 250. You know, that's a pretty neutral riding position on those two. So the transition was pretty easy for me, you know. Sorry, I had an itch on my nose. I always get an itch on my nose when I'm riding. I don't know why. So I think the riding position is very comfortable, very makes you feel like you're in control, which for someone that's new, that's a big thing. For anybody, that's a big thing, but for somebody that's new, that's a really big thing. Let's talk about fuel efficiency. Let's see if I can see here how much I'm getting right now. Right now it says I'm getting about 69.7 miles per gallon. You know, that's really good. And I think this gas tank is maybe 3 gallons. So do the math. I'm terrible at that. 210 miles, 200 something miles capacity. Which again, pretty good if you're just around town. Gotta itch my nose again here, man. I don't know what's going on. You know, and a lot of that will depend on how aggressively you're riding. So that's a big selling point on this too. Next pro I would say on this bike is the engine. I think the engine's actually a really good engine. The only thing I will say about, you know, the only thing I wish about the engine is it just had a little bit more roll-on power in the higher gears. But whatever, you shift down and you're where you probably need to be. Maybe shift down twice if you really need to get out of a hairy situation or something. But it's not a big deal. Like there's power there. It's just not like, you know, when you're in sixth gear rolling 65 miles per hour, you're not going to feel a big pull, but the pull is there. It's just not a ton. But outside of that, like to be around town or, you know, to commute, I think the power is more than ample. You know, I think 500 cc's are actually 471 cc's technically on this one. You know, I think a lot of people get focused on the number of, or the big displacement number for the bike. But I think you got to take into a lot of account. You know, a lot of motorcycles are tuned differently for different applications. You know, different torque bands, different horsepower. But I think they did a really good job with this engine. You know, if you get a decent exhaust on it, I think it sounds pretty good too. Mine is a cheap one. I got this little shorty slip-on for like 75 bucks on Amazon. I was looking at the Kaufman, which is like 200 bucks for like, I don't even know why it's that much for just essentially a straight pipe, but whatever. I found that one for $75 and it's almost the same thing. And it works fine to me. It's louder, but I think I saved probably about 15 pounds taking off that other one, so I don't think I got any horsepower gain or anything. But next pro, I think it's pretty easy to work on. You know, I've been fiddling around with some things. I installed a USB port, you know, which isn't like rocket science or anything, but you know, I did remove some of the body work just to kind of route some things in there. And you know, I'm gonna probably do the first oil change, my first oil change on a motorcycle, on this motorcycle here coming up. It needs one. I need to do it like ASAP probably. But you know, I looked it up on YouTube and it seemed pretty straightforward process. So I think it's pretty easy to work on too. You can probably customize it on this one. You know, not a ton of aftermarket parts for it, but you could do the exhaust. You could probably put some saddlebags on here if you wanted to do that. I've seen some set up for a little bit of light touring, what I would call extra light touring, maybe. You know, like a 2-hour trip somewhere, maybe. Hopefully it's not windy because that'll be a beating, but yeah, you can customize it. For this year model and before, You know, the paint jobs were okay, but after like 2016 and on, like the ones I've been seeing, to me they look a little bit more aggressive. And I know they've made some updates to the model overall, so you know, take that for what it is. This is the older model, the 2015 5-speed, but it's still a good bike, you know. And I'm sure the new ones are good too. I'd be interested to see what that 6th gear looks like, or what that 6-speed feels like, but I haven't done much to it. I really wanted to do the fender tidy kit at some point, because the fender on this is kind of ugly too, but it's not terrible. It's just, it could look better. Let's see, what else is another pro on this? I think it looks kind of cool. I mean, it's not your run-of-the-mill motorcycle. It doesn't look obviously like a super sport or a cruiser or anything like that, so I think when people see you on it, you know, they might be kind of curious as to what it is. I don't know if anybody's gonna be like, wow, that's an awesome bike, sweet as hog, bro, but I think it's a cool bike. I think it looks nice. I don't know if I covered this, I'm sorry. Maintenance schedule supposedly is very good on this, so it's not like you got to take it in all the time. And I think the biggest pro on this bike is just it is fun. It is fun and easy, and those are two things I think that are really important. Because if you're not having fun, why are you doing this, right? Oh, it might be a dead end over here. I've never gone down this way. All right, so if we could talk about some cons. I don't have a lot. You know, if you Google this bike, or if you know Google like Honda CB500F reviews or whatever, you know, I do that all the time. You know, from my experience, like 98% of the comments on this thing are positive. And so that should tell you enough, you know? It should tell you enough right there. But that should be expected. I mean, Honda executes, from my understanding, pretty well when it comes to motorcycles. And this is no different, you know? This is a purpose-built motorcycle. You know, if you look in the, like I said, the history of it, why they built it, you know, the big driver, I believe, was that the licensing in Europe and for people to have an option to step up into. And, you know, when you build a motorcycle for a purpose, you know, that gives it appeal, I think, because you know what it's capable of. Sorry, I'm just admiring the view over here. Yeah, I guess, so back to cons, and I don't really call it a con because, you know, if you know what you're getting into, it's not a con, it's just something like, I guess I sacrificed. It's just a wind protection. Like I said, now as I've gotten more comfortable on the bike, as I've gotten, you know, kind of ready to take on the next challenge, the wind protection is just something I really wish I had. Just for those longer distances. And then again, just the roll-on power at the top of the gears. I don't want to say it necessarily needs more power, just maybe, I don't know. It's just kind of a wish. I don't even call it a con. The mirrors aren't great. I guess I could talk about that. I mean, I can see everything. They're just, kind of like theirs, like plain, I don't know. I can't figure out how to get the bar ends off this thing. I don't know if that's a con or if that's just a user error type thing, but I wanted to switch them out, and those screws are like, I don't know what they put on there, man. Like super Loctite or something. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think if you're looking, here's what I recommend this motorcycle to. All right, beginner, yes. Someone who wants just a commuter, gets good gas mileage, can cruise around town. You know, maybe you're driving from the suburbs into the city or vice versa. I think this can fit the bill. You know, if you're an experienced rider who just wants a motorcycle to, you know, maybe you got a big old bagger or something, and you know you just want something, like I said, that's easy to ride around town, and you can just hop on and go do something. I think this could fit that bill too. You know, you want to make a track bike, maybe not this one specifically, while you could do it with this one. I think the 500R series might fit the bill for that, you know. They're affordable motorcycles. They work well, they're reliable, and they're predictable. And I think predictability is really important when you're motorcycling, because there's already so many things you got to kind of look out for when you're out here riding, right? Your motorcycle shouldn't be one of them. You shouldn't live in fear that your bike is too much to handle for you. I think that's a recipe for disaster. That makes you nervous, and if you're nervous, you're not relaxed, and if you're not relaxed, you're gonna get in trouble. At least that's what they told you in the courses, right? So, if you've been thinking about this motorcycle, maybe you're on the fence, you know, do I want a CB500? Because they have the, you know, the lower displacement model, the 300 series as well. And I believe it looks very similar. To me, it looks small. You know, when I went to go, you know, when I was first looking at these, it was between that and I was looking at 300 just because, you know, a new rider, I don't know, right? I don't know if it's too much power. Like, you know, I really thought, I'm a conservative person, especially if I don't know what I'm doing. You know, I thought 500 might be too much for me. And when I first rode it, you know, coming off that 250 from the training course, you know, I'm like, man, this is a lot of power. I was nervous. And about a month into it, you know, you get used to it, and right now I feel like it's just the right amount, you know. Do you need more than this? No, you don't need more than this. Now, you can want more than this. Obviously, plenty of people out there want more power. More power! But you don't need it, right? So if you're like me, you don't like to go out there and get things you don't need, it's a great motorcycle. It's a great motorcycle anyways, you know? So what is not fast? That's not what it's meant for. It's not a race bike. You know? I would call this an urban commuter. I think that fits the bill very nicely. I think that's a perfect description of what this would be considered as an urban commuter. You know? Or maybe even a suburban commuter, right? Live in the suburbs, commute in the city, or vice versa. I think as long as your ride isn't like over an hour each way, I think this is a good bike. You know? If you're in one of the lucky countries or states that allows lane splitting or filtering, I think it's a good bike for you too. It's not very thick. You might need different mirrors. They stick out a little bit far for my liking, but so that's my take on it, guys. You know, as I've just been kind of riding around town here, I hope you've been able to kind of see the application of the motorcycle, kind of what it excels at. Let's see. Alright, so that was a quick 0 to 60. Well, not so much 0, but like 1 to 60. So if you're still worried about highway speed, power, you know, I'm going 70. And then I just shifted into 5th. You know, get up to 80 pretty easily. There's power there, guys. So if you're worried about highway, really the only thing, like I said, on the highway is just the wind. You know, it does blow you around sometimes, but that's not the motorcycle. That's not because of lack of power. That's the lack of wind protection. You know. So if you're still questioning whether or not a 500cc, or actually on this one technically a 471cc motorcycle is enough for you, you know, I'm 225 pounds, and she's doing just fine with me on her, you know. So hopefully this helped anyone out there. You know, sorry I didn't have a lot of specifications about the motorcycle. I think you can find most of that online, guys. But I just kind of wanted to talk about what I thought were some of the pros. I guess the big question would be, would I buy this motorcycle again? I wouldn't, but not because of the motorcycle, but just because of the circumstances. You know, knowing what I know now, you know, I might go down a different path. I might have gotten the X, the 500X, because that one comes with a little bit of wind protection, and it has, you know, the riding position that I was actually really looking for with this one. So maybe not the exact same, you know, bike, but a very similar model. Yeah, I'd buy this engine again, no doubt, you know, especially as somebody who was new. So if you're on the fence, you know what, feel free to leave a question in the comments. Anything maybe I didn't cover, anything you're still wondering about. You know, I think the main ones are, is this a good motorcycle for a beginner? Yeah. Is it a good motorcycle for someone who's not a beginner? Yeah. This is just a good motorcycle. For what it is, which is, I think, again, like I said, an urban commuter. You know, you can maybe do some other things with it. You could probably push it to its limits and do some other things with it. You could definitely modify it and certainly do some other things with it. But in its stock form, I think its true sole purpose is just that, be a commuter. You know, a commuter, ride to work, ride to